That hat. I'll show you why. I'll show you why some hunters are uncomfortable with me. You want to know why some hunters are uncomfortable with me? Because here's some hunters. Well, gosh, I thought I'd go hunt. Anybody got any chewing tobacco? That's why they're uncomfortable, because I'm so sophisticated I scare them. They don't get it. Anybody's got a problem with Ted Nugent is weird. I'm the same guy that they're uncomfortable with, but the President of the United States invited me to speak to the graduating class of the International Law Enforcement Academy, FBI. Oh yeah, he's going to invite Ozzy Osbourne to speak to them. Big difference here. If people don't get it, it's not up to me to give them a press release and let them know what I'm made out of. There are a bunch of guys in this world. So you know who those hunters are? Those are the same hunters that every time they've seen a lie about hunting, they've turned the page and done nothing. They're so apathetic as to be neutered. The hunters that have a problem with Ted Nugent are probably the same hunters that go, yeah, bring your bow and 25 bottles of beer. We're going hunting, time for beer. Well, I've never drank a beer. I've never touched a drug. And I've never poisoned my senses. And those little chumps are probably jealous of me because I shoot bigger deer than they do, for starters. But they're weasels, and weasels will always be offended by guys like me.
Where do you hope to be in 10 years with this organization?
In a swamp, shooting bucks. In 10 years, this organization, a couple 100,000 members.
And now, how many?
10,000 in only 3 years.
Yeah.
There's not another hunting organization in the free world that has accomplished that. I've got more than 4 times the membership of other organizations that have been around for 50 years, and I've been around 3 years. Because the spirit of what this organization is about, remember, gentlemen, and ladies, and kids, the big lie is that there is no shooting community. There is no sporting community. What there has been, and what is represented by the guys who are uncomfortable with me speaking on their behalf, is because the shooting community has been a fragmented group of cliques. You've got your clique over here who doesn't like this clique because they use a different style of bow. You've got this clique who doesn't like these guys because they use bolt-action rifles instead of single shots. You've got this clique because they use maxi balls instead of round balls in their muzzle. You got cliques. Well, the Ted Nugent World Bow Hunters is about a bunch of hard-working, family Americans who want to stay entrenched in the asset column of life and shun the liabilities and the drunken game violators and have them take up bowling or golf. We don't want them in our camps. This is about a sporting community. The Ted Nugent World Bow Hunters is truly a community. It's a blood brotherhood of honest, working hard, playing hard, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed people who refuse to turn the page anymore. And we refuse to accept the status quo, because the status quo has been losing vital ground for the spirit of the wild. We're about conscientious participants in wildlife management programs, whether during the hunting season or during the non-hunting season. We will not wait for October anymore. We will pursue this crusade 12 months a year forever. And we're about accepting anybody, even if you don't want to hunt, you're welcome to join our organization. All we want you to do is realize that if you don't choose to hunt, that's natural because there's always been hunters and gatherers. But to be against hunting, legal, conscientious, ethical hunting practices, to be against that is to be against nature itself. And at a time where man has disjointed himself from the actual basics of life by throwing a switch and turning a dial and making a phone call to get whatever they need, this organization acknowledges what the scientists of the world, remember, I'm a guitar player, for Christ's sakes. Yeah, I'm not supposed to know more than the presidents of hunting organizations, but I do. The scientists of the globe confirmed what I've known for years. I knew it because I had trap lines in the 60s. I saw what happened when I didn't trap. Nobody had to tell me nothing. Nobody can tell me about muskrats that I haven't learned by touching them. The scientists of the globe concluded at the recent summit in Rio de Janeiro that if we are to save nature, we've got to kill some animals on a scientific, conscientious scheme of sustained yield, population dynamics, carrying capacity habitat that still exists. It's not supposition, it's not a hypothesis. It is a concluded reality that this organization is demanding we pursue and progress with.
What do you think about the future of hunting?
I think the future of hunting is absolutely fantastic. It's as bright as it could. This is the good old days, especially this year for me.
I'm not talking about shooting game. I'm talking about
the image of hunting.
Yeah.
The image of hunting is on a vital upswing. I do interviews every day of my life, except during the rut. I don't do interviews. And I am presenting to a segment of society the fundamentals, the motivation of families who want to respond to their instincts for self-sustaining, self-preservation, self-defense, self-awareness. I'm representing an element and an identity to the family hunters of this country that the general media has refused to listen to, because the guys who've been trying to project it either were old Bubba, who I imitated a moment ago, or some guy with the haircut and the tie. And I mean, what are those for? Do these guys drool? Do they need something to catch the drool? Is that what a tie is? Anyhow, I don't have to play games for anybody. Did you notice this? I don't have to play any games. I say it how it is. If you don't like it, that's tough. I'm not dumb enough to think that I have a right to an opinion, because nobody does have a right to an opinion until they have shouldered the responsibility of doing homework based on the subject they would like an opinion on. What you've heard here tonight has nothing to do with opinions. It's raining, I'm soaking wet, those are raindrops. Opinions don't mean diddly. There's no crime. This is my opinion. We can live it. A comfortable concept and ignore the big picture ramifications. That's what game management is. It's proven. I recommend, if you don't understand it, you just leave me alone, because we're going to do it anyhow.
What about the guys you talked about during come out of deer season, or out in the woods after hunting season? You talked about the stop sign shooters and the poachers. The enemy so far has been the anti-hunter.
Well, I'd like to make...
What about those within our ranks?
The real enemy of conservation in this country is not the anti-hunter. It is not the religious cult of animal extremists. Even though they are an embarrassing element of society, who represent everything that's rotten about it. The lying, the dishonesty, the corruption, the manipulation of finances. But the real enemy to conservation in this country is the fragmentation and the infighting drunken lawbreaker who, as a sporting community, we have tolerated far too long. We need to throw them out of our camps, and we need to call the cops. And if some clown shoots a stop sign, we got to reprimand them ourselves and call the cops and make sure they never hunt again. The days of tolerating old Bubba are gone. And that's why I get criticized, because some of the old guard would just assume that old Bubba maintained the representation of the hunting families, and that's a dirty, dirty lie.
But is your group doing anything to try to deal with that element?
You might say. My membership is so unlike any other membership. Number one, I'll play in front of 2.5 million people in the next 12 months. I will articulate on stage in front of those people that the reason my guitar playing is so sexy and so greasy and so much fun is because my senses are finely tuned, because I'm a hunter. And when Jimi Hendrix laughed at me for not taking LSD, I laughed right back and said, "You go ahead, Jim. Go ahead and drool on yourself. I'm going hunting. He's dead. I'm still Ted." And we're taking that message to a generation of young people that have been literally scared away from the hunting world by old Bubba. And we are taking the spirit of gregarious sharing to a bunch of young people. We're inviting them into our camps now. We're inviting them into our archery lessons. We're inviting them into our hunting organizations. And we're showing the kids of this world that hanging out in the mall, shit, drooling on yourself, playing Nintendo, getting high on the recent trendy chemical, and trying to decide which body part we're going to pierce this week, don't quite cut the mustard. And that if they really want to have a sensuous life, then they've got to clean up their senses, get a hunter safety certificate, and when you get close to a whitetail buck, call me, and we'll talk about what exciting is. And it's happening. There's only one state in the nation that is experiencing a growth in hunters' hunting license numbers. Guess whose state that would be? Thank you very much. Because I've done this kind of media impact, and I could go on, but it would take a couple months just to list the amount of impact that my membership, my directors, and personally, certainly myself, has had on the general media with the Hunters for the Hungry campaign. Here's a perfect example. My directors and members have generated something like 20 tons of quality game meat that we've shared with the homeless nationwide in all different regions of this great country. But recently, there was an article in the Detroit Free Press that started out at 2 paragraphs. The starting paragraph said how the People for Ethical Treatment of Animals had lambasted Ted Nugent and entered me into their hall of shame for being the heartless murderer of animals. There's just no such thing. Because last time I looked, these innocent animals will eat each other alive. And we can go on and on. I've got the statistics to back this up, not to mention footage. But then the next paragraph started saying how Ted Nugent recently went into 2 homeless shelters and distributed 400 coats and 650 pounds of venison and cooked it and served it to the hungry. Well, now anybody with any morality, with any intelligence at all, would see that if HADA designated me a member of their Hall of Shame, yet I'm doing these nice humanitarian gestures, that in fact, HADA are the ones that should be ashamed of themselves. Because I do this kind of stuff at least a couple times a week, all through, except by the industry.
Which industry?
The music industry. Certainly my hunting career is defined by the hunting industry. But now they're catching on and seeing that if they want to get another generation of shooters, another generation of conservationists, that they need to impact. And the NRA, SCI, DU, you name every one of them. They couldn't do in 100 years what I do in a half hour. Not to mention the articles that I've written for international publications on a quarterly basis.
Like anybody else, maybe your noted stature that you know that is going to get involved?
No, the rest of them are whips. The rest of them are afraid somebody might not go to the movie if they talk about hunting. They might be afraid somebody might not come to the baseball game.
You didn't give a blood month?
Sure.
What way?
Well, I got about, how many quarts a guy got in him? However many quarts I got, I lust that shit. I need, see, what we've gone to as a society is a bunch of liars. Because a lady one time recently said to me, but Ted, we've got to get rid of blood and pain in this world. And I said, oh, let me think about this. Blood and pain. You mean when one of my 4 children were born, that blood and pain? Sorry, I ain't giving it up. How about the blood and pain that an individual or a surgeon perpetrates when he saves a life? Know what their favorite part of the animal was? The guts. What, are we going to condemn them for doing that? Does anybody have the balls to stand up and tell me how none of their butterball turkeys last week during Thanksgiving hadn't even, if you have paid for dead chickens? You paid for thousands of dead chickens, and you're responsible for their death, including the gutting, including the flowing blood, and the bloody aprons, and the salmonella, which the USDA claims there's 100% infestation in all domestic poultry. And they go, you're right, but still. Well, of course I'm right, and there is no but still. See, they want it, but they don't want to admit it. And it's this kind of hypocrisy that has You're as cheap as you can, and if you've got to bust a couple of them babies on the rocks to get us to for $1.19 a barrel, just go right ahead and do it. Just get it to me cheap, Captain. How dare those people condemn Exxon when they did it? See what's happening here? This is what this crusade is about. It's going, hey, America, you got a big booger hanging out of your nose. That goes back to that old Harry. You all went to college. I never went to college. I saw it.
I was writing something else.
I saw it.
I was writing your last thought.
How many days a year you got?
I 100 every day. So I said, well, see, if I fly from Joplin, I can be in bed by 3:30. We can still get up at 5. I can hunt, take a nap, hunt in the afternoon, get out right after sunrise, and if I got something, I can still have time to get it, gut it, and get to stage. Sure as hell, I got to Joplin at 3:30. I got out of Joplin, landed in Stuttgart at 3:30. We went to the lodge. I went to sleep for an hour and a half, got up. 8 o'clock that morning, a little whacked myself. Nice big 4-corn buck come in, 18 yards, right through the heart. I was in heaven. Because one day hunting on a new piece of property, you just don't expect to get anything. I got a nice buck. I was just thrilled. So I gutted him, and I touched him, and I kissed him, and got a lot of pictures, and I went to bed. 3 hours later, I got up, went back to another tree stand. This looks good. I climbed up. An hour later, another 4-corn comes by, 25 yards, right through the heart. Another buck. I went, geez, 2 bucks in one day. This is outrageous. I touched him. I went, I could either gut him or I could get back in the tree. I climbed back up the tree. An hour later, another buck comes running through the flooded timber. I got around. Instinctually, I just got in position. I didn't know if I was going to shoot. 66 yards. He's going through. I see a little opening coming up, 66 yards. Punk, you couldn't have hired the Surgeon General to cut him any better. Right through the top of the heart. 3 bucks, one day. 3 bucks, one day. Unbelievable. You can edit this however you need to, but... Believe it. But, I went and the things I did on stage that night, my guitar, see, I don't wash my hands completely after I got them, I go on with this. That's why they think I have a bloodlust, real tough. The hell. It's just something about it, And they weren't big bucks, but they were dead.
Is it ethical to take a 66-yard shot at the front?
Say again now?
You think it's ethical to take a 66-yard shot at the front?
For me it is. Absolutely. Absolutely. When you shoot as many arrows as I do at flying crows at 100 yards, and sparrows and starlings and pigeons, and you start to where you can start just missing them by a couple inches, that's still a lung shot at 66 yards, Captain. Am I promoting it for other people to try? I'm not promoting anything for anybody to try except to be conscientious, practice like an idiot like I do. I shoot 100 arrows a day. And I know that if I draw that bow back and I let go, it's because I am extremely confident that that arrow's heading for a vital, or I won't let go. And see, and that's one of the reasons they criticize me. He goes, well, that can't be, you can't do that. Well, Fred Baer did it, Ben Pearson did it, Howard Hill did it, and I could name a bunch of contemporaries today that do it, and I do it, and the buck's dead. I've wounded 1 deer this year. I tagged my 52nd big game animal on that last buck this year. And am I a game hog? No way. Every scrap of every animal I killed was utilized, including every hide to go for the Camp for Kids. I've even saved some bones for some Indian buddies of mine who wanted some kind of, I don't know what they use them for. So, no, I stand, I feel absolutely bulletproof that what I do is in total unison and harmony with the spirit of the wild, as close to the best Native American Indians lifestyle practices that a person could adhere to in the modern world. Not only that, but I'll share, I'll take at least 6 of my deer minus the back straps. I mean, I'm nice, but I'm not dumb. I'll take at least 6 of my deer, and I will go on New Year's Eve, when I happen to have it, I'll be in the middle of 7 concerts in a row, but I will go to the Salvation Army in Detroit before my New Year's Eve show. and we will cook up a huge vat of Nugent Gonzo venison strudel, and I will feed thousands of hungry people in Detroit. Anybody that's got a problem with that is just plain weird. You know why guys criticize me? Because I do way too many good things. And while they're still waking up in the morning, I've already done great things, and they go, "Hey, fair. Well, get your ass out of bed and join me."
Ted, landowners owning a lot of private land. Like I got a big chunk in Wisconsin, the guy next to me's got 500-600 acres. The guy in Duluth, he's got a couple of lots of acres, 1,000 acres, people there. You know, what is, can landowners manage their own property?
In a lot of regions they can't, because the game regulations dictate tag limitations. That's another thing. I mean, there's a whole crusade within the crusade that our World Bowhunters has already started impacting game agencies to upgrade the management policies throughout the nation. For example, take the landowner situation. In Michigan, we have lobbied successfully to get block tag permits because I need to shoot more deer on my property than I can with the limited tags available to me and my family. And luckily I have family, employees, and I donate a lot of hunts to organizations, and we auction them off, and the money goes for the Children's Leukemia Foundation. And for my Camp for Kids, I raised almost $50,000 last year for charities, donating free hunts to auction off to people. People pay big bucks and they come and hunt on my property, and then I let them shoot some does. But the worst case scenario is in Texas, where guys own vast, hundreds of thousands of acres, and there's no way they can manage their deer unless they bring in the public. Then you've got this extreme liability horror story in this country that we have cornered ourselves with. Well, how do you let the public on without one of them tripping and shooting his big toe off, without having him sue you? Now you got to give your property to him because he fucked up. So the inequities that exist and that put a chokehold on intelligent management programs are something that we plan on knocking down.
But that's through the governmental agencies. Because my problem is I got bubbas coming on the property and screwing it up. You know,
well, in America,
I got to cut it off. I can't let
you got to.
Because they're screwing it up.
And Minnesota and Wisconsin got a long way to go. In Michigan, I'm trying to come up with a more equitable fashion because I think that the public should have a better quality experience and a larger envelope of opportunity. But that doesn't mean that I'm just going to let anybody come on my land and help me harvest my deer. They've got to die. See, that's...
Ready? 3, 2, 1. Like him or not, Ted Nugent comes at you in only one way. The same way he shoots and plays his music. All right, want to do another one? Saw somebody's shadow or something. 3, 2, 1. Like him or not, Ted Nugent comes at you in only one way. The same way he shoots and plays his music.
About perspective, you got to keep this stuff in perspective. It is not my goal. It shouldn't be your goal. This is opinion. There are banking laws, but there are still pricks out there robbing banks. So you can't stop banking. What we need to do is we need to throw Bubba out, and every time these chumps break an ethical stature and statute, and there is to both, we need to let the general media know that this is not hunting. This is buffoonery. This is fat man's mall. This is going to the mall to hunt. And we need to differentiate. And I got news, I got to tell you, mom and pop America ain't that dumb. They do not think Sally Jesse Raphael or this show. They might sit back and they'll go, well, he's got a little too much hair to invite him to dinner on Sunday. Way too cocky to have as a bingo partner. But he's making sense. They're not dumb. And they don't confuse the shooting of drugged bobcats out of a cage with antelope hunting in Wyoming. You know what I mean? Corn. Yes. And has he ever killed one over it? Nope. Because anybody who says shooting a deer over bait is a pushover is a liar or lucky. I've shot a lot of deer over bait, and what generally happens, you know, there's so many things I can say. What generally happens is the first time one comes in, which is usually a button buck, the arrow falls off and the dummy still stands there. You get the arrow back on, the arrow falls off again and he's still there because he's a button buck, and finally, thump, you get him. Well, then you know what happens? That's probably the last button buck you'll shoot. Then what you do is you learn to watch him and wait for the big ones to come in, because they're a good buck. Anything over 1.5 years old is warier around a bait pile than anywhere in his domain. So that's why the pettiness.
Fucking crossbow.
They're noisy.
Yeah, well, the thing is that I'll take, you get a crossbow, and I will take on anybody with a crossbow with my pro safari, and I will outkill you. Period.
How you been doing with your grunt call? I noticed you got.
I grunted in the 3 Pope and Youngs I killed this year. I grunted all 3 of them.
That's how that 6-pack.
It's super.
Crossbow, use it instead of your own 6. We got to. Here's the only thing that matters. This is the only thing that matters. We have a resource. We need to manage it for health. Period. I don't give a shit when. Obviously, beyond the biological considerations. The young of the year are now independent. That's when you start. That's the only decision. You had a.